Hey everyone, my name is Mike Vaughn. I'm a writer at Geek Vibes Nation, and I'm also the author of The Ultimate Guide to Strange Cinema.
And I'm Dylan Gonzalez. I'm the editorial director for geekvibesnation.com and also a co-host of the Home Dance Film Festival podcast.
And welcome to a new Video Attic new release roundup. If you're new here, welcome. What we do here is we go back and forth talking about this week's home video releases. We run the spectrum from, well, as you'll see this week, we are talking about highbrow French cinema to Birdemic. So we got a little bit of something for everybody, but you got something special before we start.
Yes, I have a giveaway for us, and I have a feeling it might be on the latter side of that spectrum for this title. You actually reviewed this title for geekvibesnation.com. I have not had a chance to watch this, but I'm very excited. This is the Shudder original horror film Glorious with Ryan Quanten from True Blood fame and J.K. Simmons' voice, I believe. I think you would be able to tell me that. So you get this nice slip cover, and artwork underneath is the same. And then kind of got this disc art here. So we have 5 copies of Glorious, which, correct me if I'm wrong, refers to a magical glory hole, like a talking glory hole. Yeah, okay. If that sounds interesting to you, if you want to have a chance to win this cosmic nightmare, so we have 5 copies of this. Just be sure, watch our video, and tell us which of our titles we're talking about today you are most interested in. And it's that easy. We're going to be picking 5 winners. Please be within the United States. We cannot ship internationally right now, but everyone else is welcome to comment and kind of share around. But I'm very excited about this. I loved your review, and I think this is going to be a fun one for everyone. Like I said, 5 copies, so there's a good chance that you might win this if you comment. So just watch through, pay attention. It's that easy, and we always have a lot of great giveaways. So just stay tuned to this channel. We're going to keep doing this as the year goes on. So Glorious from RLJ Films from Shudder. Get into it. So, but to start us off, to give people actual options to choose from, I want you to kick us off with your first title.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I want to also say really quickly that it is a fun movie. I got to interview the director, Rebecca. She's great. I have a spoiler-free interview that I can include in the description, as well as her podcast, which is amazing. So yeah, I want to kick it off with so my first 2 titles are very nostalgic for me. So I was really excited to hear that they were coming to Blu-ray. So my first title is Fear with Mark Wahlberg, Reese Witherspoon. And so no features, unfortunately. This is bare bones. But we do get like a very intense cover there. And no interior, just so this it's so frustrating because I like this movie a lot, but the release is so womp womp. But yeah, so this is a mid-90s psycho thriller that is sort of cut from the erotic thriller cloth of the 80s and 90s. But what makes this really interesting is this puts a decidedly teen spin on it, where a lot of those other movies were more firmly adult focused. And I think that's a really interesting kind of template to work with your movie. And yeah, it's just as cheesy and teen angsty as I remembered it. It is I don't know. It's interesting because this movie is a little bit more compelling than what I thought it was going to be. Again, I liked it when I was younger, but your tastes tend to mature and develop. So I was worried that it was going to be maybe too cheesy and there would be nothing really interesting propelling the movie forward. But It actually really has an interesting thing to say about kind of toxic relationships, controlling relationships. This is something that's even more palpable, I think, in a post-Me Too world. So viewing it in that kind of lens, it was definitely a little bit more interesting. And the soundtrack to this slaps so hard. I love it. I want this soundtrack. So the negative is the transfer, unfortunately. And Mill Creek is a little bit hit or miss. I was kind of surprised because this is I had to check, but it was a Universal licensed film. And it's very underwhelming. The colors do pop. Skin tones look nice, warm. They have a really nice natural look to them. But the overall like most of the film is very noise heavy, not really even so much grain, it's just a lot of almost like a staticky kind of look. This almost looks like a DVD up convert rather than a true like restored film. So I did also take note, a lot of times you get a lot of blurring, and this does unfortunately get a little bit distracting at times. I mean, it's not awful looking. Again, I feel like the colors are nicely done. I just think that especially on a 4K TV, it just looks not great. So um the price is right. If you like this movie, I definitely really dig the retro VHS packaging, but yeah, I was just really disappointed. I wish it would have had a nicer kind of restoration source. But it's fine. It's by far not the worst that I've seen, especially from like a 90s film. But yeah, a little disappointing, but love the film. And again, if you wanted without any of the bells and whistles and you just want the movie looking pretty serviceable, the price, like I said, the price is right. So I think these retail for about maybe $10 when they're on sale. So it's not bad. But I'm holding out hope that we get maybe like a 4K with maybe a new interview or something, because I think this is a pretty fun 90s thriller. It's kind of in the vein of like Crush. If have you ever seen that one?
Mm-mm.
um I'm blanking on Alicia Silverstone is in that one.
Oh, cool. I like
Yeah,
her, so
yeah.
I'll seek that out.
Have you seen Fear?
Yes, it's been a couple of years. I was going to say this actually isn't the first time that Mill Creek has put out this title, because I actually own a Blu-ray. It's
Mm.
a 2-pack with another Mark Wahlberg movie, Contraband, on a single disc. So I was thinking that maybe at least this disc, even though you say it's not great, maybe it's better than it's sharing a disc with another movie. Maybe a little bit less compression artifacts, but
Yeah.
that's still not sounding very promising. So I'm not sure how to feel about
I
this.
just remember there's two scenes that I remembered like vividly before rewatching this, and it's a famous scene where he's like beating on his chest to make it look
Yeah.
like, and then I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this, but
The roller coaster scene.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which they get a little handsy, I'll just say that, but
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a fun movie. I just wish this was looking nicer, but it's what it is, what it is.
So sounds like a tepid endorsement. Maybe check out the movie, but don't expect a lot from the disc, type of thing. Your description of that actually weirdly ties in well to my first movie of like kind of toxic relationships. This is one we talked about on a recent episode on our romance Valentine's Day episode, and that is Criterion's new release of Chilly Scenes of Winter, which I know you also watched recently. Andre talked about this on our anti-romance episode, and at that time I had not seen that. He mentioned a lot, or they mentioned a lot, that this was coming to Criterion, and now here it is. They were right. I was getting this, so they called me out. They did, but this is a really solid release and an interesting movie. So here's the booklet here. You can fold out and have this nice essay about the movie. Let's see who did this one. Shani Inello, who is a university professor. So if you want to learn a little bit about this Joan Micklin Silver classic, you can get this. And since Andre did such a great job of delving into this movie, I'm not going to go like hardcore into it, but I'm just going to kind of give a brief kind of synopsis and my own impressions. Basically, what this is it John Hurd? I don't want to. Yeah, John Hurd and Mary Beth Hurt. The Hurd and Hurt. I didn't want to mess up. So yeah, John Hurd. He plays this guy who is kind of reflecting on this relationship he had with this woman who was married in his office. She was separated from her husband, but they kind of got into a relationship that is kind of iffy, and I'll kind of go into that in a little bit more in a second. But it's kind of contentious. But then they're separated at the beginning of the movie, and he's reflecting back on this, and kind of you're seeing what that relationship looked like, and there's a lot of stuff that he's also going through in his life. But overall, you can tell, at least in my opinion, whenever you're watching that this relationship was not really meant to be and is kind of problematic. But it's a very interesting movie. I like that Joan Micklin Silver, who we have talked about several times, you talked about Hester Street, I talked about A Fish in the Bathtub. She makes this not gross, which is cool. Like she approaches this material with like a really wisely, but she doesn't try to like just be like one of the guys and let things slide. She can get like more emotional depth from this piece. And what I particularly was struck by was John Hurd. He plays kind of this like kind of a maniacal person. He has a lot going on with his life. His mother's kind of like helpless and kind of always getting like calling him over and like threatening suicide and all this stuff. So it's kind of like a lot of stuff going on in his head, but he kind of puts a lot of stock into love and romance, and he falls very quickly in love with this woman from his office, and like she kind of goes along with it and is kind of like finds him charming, but his love kind of starts to be a little bit oppressive. And the way he jokes about stuff, like you can kind of, he would probably laugh it off as like, oh, it's just like, it's a funny joke. Like if you like one scene that really struck me was whenever she was like simply trying to like, oh, I can't hang out with you after work, I got to go to a gynecologist. And he's like drilling her about this. Like, what, like, are you actually going? Why are you doing this? Why can't I come along? And she's like, sometimes I just need some time by myself. And just like, oh, are you going to like fuck the gynecologist? So it's just like, bro, you need to calm it down. Just like that type of stuff. But then he's just like joking about like, oh, I'm gonna go beat the shit out of him. Haha, just kidding. You know I'm kidding, right? It's just like a very toxic energy just throughout that I was not feeling at all. But like, it's not a fault of the movie. It's just that character. I think he's meant to be kind of intense, and like it shows like that toxic obsessive love, which I think it works really well in this movie, and especially as presented on this disc, because that's one thing I was going to talk about. This was originally released as like, I think it's called Head Over Heels originally, and there was like a different ending that was released for a couple of years until Joan was able to come back and like cut it to her original ending, which is a lot more impactful. The alternate ending is on this, and I like watched it and I was like, oh, that's exactly what I did not want to happen. So like, I'm glad she was able to cut it back in the early 80s. So it's not like a new director's cut or anything. This was like something she did a long time ago, and restored the original title, Chilly Scenes of Winter. I love how this ends, and I'm not going to spoil or anything, but it's just a very impactful ending of just like showing kind of like the culmination of this like odyssey of obsessive love. The actors play it perfectly. Mary Beth Hurt is like really fantastic, and John Hurd is appropriately kind of creepy and unhinged. It's kind of, and there's a lot of great like character actors and everything. This movie just really worked for me, even though I was very uncomfortable and irritated a lot of times. it's a very good movie, and I think, like I said, Andre, they go into it way more than I do, and it's like probably way more um, uh, clear about all like the kind of the thematic elements. But overall, I just say I really like this movie, and I'm glad this is out on 4K from Criterion. One thing that they mentioned on that podcast is they hoped that the audio commentary would be ported over to this. It is not, unfortunately. So if you have the old Twilight time, hold on to it. They said it's a very good commentary track. I'd be interested in like hearing that, so I might have to seek that out myself. But this new Criterion comes from a new 4K restoration, and it looks really nice. Like I said, I have not seen the original disc, but this is a really nice transfer. It has like nice natural grain. It's not a lot of, you don't see any damage or compression artifacts, anything of that sort. It's a very nice, well-made movie from it. This is 1979. It's appropriately gritty, but not overly like noisy or anything like that. It has the mono soundtrack, which sounds really nice. It carries over some vintage special features. I'm not sure of the overlap with the Twilight time, but this does include a vintage 15-minute interview with the director, I believe from the late 90s, where she's kind of reflecting back on some of the movies that she's done. There is a 45-minute documentary from the early 80s where she talks about her beginning from like Hester Street to this movie. So it's like a nice 45-minute documentary on her, which is really great. There is a new interview with some of the stars. It's a 29-minute interview with, I want to get all the names right. Griffin Dunn, producer Mark Metcalf, and Amy Robinson, who is also a producer performer. Griffin Dunn had a very small part in this movie, but he's also a major actor in his own right. He's in American Werewolf in London, which you've also talked about. We see everything connects on our show. Like we've talked about everything, but it's a really great new interview where Griffin Dunn, it's really nice to hear him talk, like kind of credit Joan for kind of like starting his acting career, kind of, and just like he's like that led to getting American Werewolf in London. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like this little movie where he was like in it for like a few minutes led to that, and like which is a classic. And also, like I said, the alternate ending and like the theatrical trailer is here. So this is a really nice release. I'm sad it doesn't have the audio commentary track, but the new restoration I think is probably the big selling point here. And just like the essay, everything. Criterion did a really nice job with this, and I think this is a movie that just does deserve a bigger platform. I think it was like a kind of hidden away from view with the Twilight time release, so I'm glad that is now like kind of rectified with the Criterion release. But I know you also had a chance to see that after we talked about it on the Valentine's Day episode.
I thought it was really interesting. It is definitely when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, this is definitely a anti-Valentine's movie because it is such a toxic, weird relationship where the power dynamics are so skewed, and he has these meltdowns. Like I like how you were struck by that scene with the about the gynecologist, because I think like that's another thing that kind of actually stuck out in my mind. Like having a while to see it and then process it. It's like, yeah, it's like he's just next level like crazy. And like I think he like threatened to beat up the doctor and her.
Yeah. And she's like,
And,
no, I'll come back and beat the shit out of you. And he's like,
and
just
I was
kidding. I'm like, whoa, no, red flag, red flag, red flag.
a ton of red flags. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you still with him? It's madness. But yeah, I'm excited for that release. I'm glad you got to cover it. I'll also link the Valentine's Day episode, and then listen to it all, but I mean there's a timestamp if you want to just listen to that review in particular. But my next film is also kind of about family dysfunction. So I probably did watch this on VHS actually, because I'm that old, but this is Problem Child. Which is so funny. Again, it has the faux VHS, but like I really did rock this VHS back in the day. So there's
for sure. Yeah.
um and I know this actor has done like conventions and stuff. I would love to interview him. So if he somehow sees this, hit me up. And there's no interior art, but I can show that really quick too. So yeah, this is one of those really weird pitch black comedies that kind of somehow was sort of manufactured into a small franchise, which is weird because this movie is very um it's it's interesting because it straddles that line of like dark, but they play it really smart where they soften down some of the darker edges, but they're still kind of like they're still there, if that makes sense. Junior definitely is, I mean, he definitely has a lot of early indicators of a psychopath, like criminal behavior, tortures animals, tons of stuff like that. But again, it's played. It certainly is played with like kid gloves. So I like that balance where it's like, yeah, it is pitch black, but again, we have something that's like you could show anybody this. This really makes me mad that this has a rare 0% rating on Rotten Tomato, and
Wow.
yeah, I don't understand why, because it is so. Watching it now, I certainly see the flaws in it. I think that there's a little bit of pacing issues. I think that some of the story threads maybe aren't as clean as they could have been, but it's just a fun, silly, over the top ride. It's meant to be a very sharp satire on, family, about commoditizing family and using that almost as like a status symbol. I think that's something that's even more sort of relevant now in a post sort of Kim Kardashian world where your baby is literally your brand. Like that's your parenthood is a branded commodity. And that's something that this movie really touches on that I think is so ahead of its time. um but yet, you still have like great elements. You have John Ritter at his peak. He is great. It has oh, Kramer,
Oh,
black
Michael Richards.
Michael Richards, which
Yeah.
yikes. But he plays a serial killer that Junior idolizes. He idolizes him so much he wears a bow tie in his honor. And again, this is a kid, and he's really into this adult serial killer that ends up kidnapping him. But it's a comedy. So again, it straddles that line of like dark and funny. I think maybe it doesn't get that mixture right 100% of the time, but I think mostly it does. And it's a fine line to walk, but I think it does really well. As for the transfer, so this is another Universal film, and I think that this looks overall a little bit better. I think the materials that they were using were oddly enough, I think in better shape than maybe Fear, because it does look overall better. Colors pop really nicely, but you don't get as much distortion or like artifacting as you do with Fear. So it's not pristine. I mean, again, there is a clarity issue, and I think that that's just because they didn't really put a lot of like elbow grease into this restoration. It just looks like a really nice DVD upconvert, but it's solid. It looks good if you want this film and you want it like just the movie, no bare bones, or like bare bones with nothing else on it but the movie. It's good. The price is right. The audio sounds fine. Um, it's a classic. I think if anybody hasn't seen it, I don't like the sequel. I would like it to come out just as completist. I think the sequel's already been out on Blu-ray, but I don't recall. But yeah, the first one's a classic. It's great. Everybody should check it out.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute since I've watched that one, but it might be time for me to dig it off the shelf and check that one out. Especially having watched Clifford last year, I got to see how
Mm.
they compare and
Hmm.
contrast and see which of these hellion kids are my favorite.
That would be a good double feature, actually.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so my next title is from Quiver, and it is the recent horror movie The Retaliators,
Hmm.
which is a like a indie horror movie that played a lot of festivals. You can see a lot of accolades around here from different festivals. And here I'll show the cover art. So this one, it's decent. It didn't blow me away, but I found it like engaging enough to like not feel like I've wasted my time. Basically, this is about there's a pastor who there are kind of like moments where you can kind of feel that maybe he's holding back a little bit of uh like rage or like bubbling, like kind of like he's trying to like he's being kind of pushed around a little bit, but he's like, nope, gotta walk the righteous path, that type of thing. And he's very protective. He has two young daughters. I believe his wife has maybe passed away. I do not recall that off the top of my head, but she's not in the picture at least. So he's very protective of his young daughters. One night, he gives his oldest daughter like a little bit of a little bit of trust to go to a party on her own. And on the way to the party, she stops at a gas station. She comes across this like dude who we've seen like earlier in the movie has like been like kidnapping and killing people. And he sees her and uh, chases her down in a car, like chases her down on the road, and then I'll just say tragedy strikes. And this pastor, he kind of is kind of in a really bad place until one day a retired cop comes to visit him and tells him that he has the guy who killed his daughter, and if he wants to, like, he will take him to the place so he can like have like basically like a I think like an hour alone with him to just do whatever he wants to him. And it's kind of like this psychological thing of like, does he take this opportunity to like uh, enact vengeance? Does he kind of throw away everything that he's like built his like reputation on to like get vengeance? Is it worth it? Who is this person who is like who secured this guy? What is his kind of relate like his backstory with like vengeance and stuff? And you kind of it devolves into like a really strange, almost like fantastical place where it's I this isn't really a spoiler, but it kind of like gets into like almost like House of a Thousand Corpses territory, where it's kind of like a just a weird montage of just like horrific imagery and like makeup of just like grotesque figures, and it gets to some really interesting points. And it mostly pulls it off well. What kind of kind of draws this back from being like, ooh, like highly recommended, is kind of like the acting is kind of like iffy. It's just like they're not the worst. I've reviewed worse, but they're also not the best. And uh, I don't know, just kind of where it ends up is it makes sense, but it's not really like I don't know, it didn't blow me away. It's just kind of like a fine horror movie. It did what it needed to do. It just didn't blow me away. One thing that did interest me early on, one of the times where he's kind of getting pushed around and like holding back his anger, he's being pushed around by, I can't remember his real name, but it's the guy who plays Dante from Clerks. So like he just made like a random appearance in this movie. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't seen you hardly outside of the Kevin Smith movie Askew Universe, but it was good to see him playing an asshole. But as a movie, it's fine for horror fiends. I say like ourselves, more so you. You're more of a horror fiend than I am, but like we both love horror films. It's worth a watch, but we've seen better. We like I said, it's squarely in the middle. The transfer is pretty solid for this one. It's like a newer movie, so like no real issues. Nice DTS 5.1 soundtrack. This does include a array of cast interviews that totals 11 minutes. There's also a collection of music videos, which I meant to touch on this. There's a collection of music videos that total 22 minutes of music videos for this, because this is a very like music-driven film. But like the music that is in this, it's not personally to my taste, but it's like a weird kind of like almost kind of like not even hot topic like rock music, but kind of like a bro kind of Nickelbacky rock music, which is interesting for the soundtrack. I know one the band I think they might be slightly like religious based, but the band Five Finger Death Punch I think are as themselves in this movie, which is interesting. I've mostly just heard about them like through various friends I've had throughout the years, but they are in this movie. So other than that, there's just like a trailer and everything. So the music kind of took me out of stuff too, along with the acting. But overall, it's if you just want kind of like a more like a revenge movie with some grotesque imagery and some decent violence, it's fine. It's entertaining. So tepid recommendation, but it's overall it's worth a watch. So Retaliators from Quiver, it's decent.
Yeah, I can't recall if I formally reviewed this, but I did see it because I interviewed the director, and
Oh, cool.
yeah, it's kind of weird because there's elements that I liked of it, but its social commentary is very wonky at best,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels a little God, I'm trying to think of how I want to articulate this. It felt very like it had an agenda to push, and it wasn't just like, I don't know. There was some, I don't know. It almost felt a little right-leaning in its sort of
Yeah.
kind of Christian kicking everyone's ass for a righteous cause. It's Yeah, it's a little much, but I don't know.
Yeah,
When you
that's kind of what I was trying to touch on. Like, this isn't a like faith-based film because it's very violent and gnarly, but it also has that kind of like undercurrent, like you said, that kind of feels like, what is this movie trying to say?
it definitely like the director was really nice. When I talked to him, he was very like enthusiastic about the movie, and he like loves horror movies. It was very evident that he, just talking to him, you can tell he had that passion. And I'll also link in the description if you want to check out that interview. Like with my Rebecca interview, it's spoiler free. We just, if you want to hear more about that movie, but yeah, it's fine. It's something that I wish that tonally it could have made a little bit more sense, but yeah, it's something. I do like how and I won't spoil it, but you kind of think it's one thing as far as like a popular horror genre subgenre, and then it's actually something else. So I'm trying to be
Yeah.
vague on purpose, but you probably get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was trying to be very like I didn't want to just give away the whole movie, but
Yeah.
it takes a turn for
Mhm.
sure.
Um, so my next title is a set that I really like, and I'm going to just do an overview of like my recommendation for this set as well. But this is the Vault Sci-Fi from the Vault collection from Mill Creek. So this time around, I'm going to be talking about 20 Million Miles to Earth and the 30-Foot Bride of Candy Rock. And the so this is the front and the back. Again, very nice that we do have some features. This isn't just like slapped together. This is a really nice looking set. So the 30-Foot Bride has a commentary track from the guys at the Monster Party podcast. And 20 Million Miles to Earth, unfortunately, is the only film that does not have a commentary track. But all these commentary tracks are special to this set, so that's really nice. I appreciate that. So first, I want to talk about the 30-Foot Bride of Candy Rock, which is something that I had never even heard of, let alone seen. But this also ties into something you've been talking about, which is the Lou Costello movies. And I believe this is Lou's first and last solo movie. I believe he fortunately passed away not very long after this. Or maybe it even wasn't quite released yet and he passed away. Like it was, I don't actually even think he's seen it. Which is covered in, it's covered in great detail in the commentary track. The commentary track is stellar. If you want to hear more about the making of the film, about Lou Costello, his relationship with Bud Abbott and their falling out, it's fantastic. These gentlemen really know what they're talking about. So this is kind of a send up of the giant movies that were super popular in the 50s. The problem is this is a very misguided comedy. It's kind of light on the laughs, and sadly the movie was made on the cheap, and it really does show. I will say that I couldn't help but enjoy the movie because it is cheesy and campy, and I am familiar with the genre that they're kind of doing a soft parody of. So there's something that's inherently kind of clever about, sending up some of these giant movies that there was just a ton of them. Giant people, giant insects, everything atomic level, huge. But yeah, so this film transfer is not the best. We this is the first film of this set that I do really notice that there's some scratches, some artifacts present. It does have a nice clear clarity to it overall. I will say that I mean, there's a lot of detail in like the set design and the costumes, which is evident of it looking at least a little bit better than it probably ever has been. So, I mean, that's a plus. But yeah, it's definitely not pristine. The next film is 20 Million Miles to Earth, which I think is really good. I haven't seen this in a little while, so this was like really fun. This is one of those movies where if I wanted to point out a handful of like quintessential 50s sci-fi films, like stuff that has all the hallmarks of these kind of films, this is certainly would be among them. It's got a giant creature, it's got a plucky kid, it's got a scientist, and it's all wrapped up with a corny philosophical line. So, like the previous movie I covered, which was It Came From Beneath the Sea, this has maybe some of the best effects from Ray Harryhausen. Again, this is kind of considered his like best work. This movie is better paced than I think some of the other films that I've covered on this set. It's really more about the action and spectacle, but you do have this kind of forced romance subplot, which is kind of par for the course with these films. This film looks pretty good as well. Kind of like with Bride of Candy Rock, there is some artifacts and scratches going on, but I think overall they're working from a really nice restoration. This film is something that's been out for a while on DVD and Blu-ray, so I'm fairly confident they're working from a pretty nice source. So yeah, overall, this is a really nice set. I was really thinking about like if you wanted an inexpensive like starter set to 50 science fiction, like this would be really good. Like it has a little bit of everything you might want, like aliens, creatures, 50-foot candy rock rides. It's got it all. So highly recommend it. I'm glad that I can not like finally not shit on a Mill Creek release, because I do think that they when they try and when they put their effort into it, they do come out with really nice stuff. Like I think their Hammer film set from like a year or two back was like phenomenal. So
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking forward to digging into that set. I've already watched the Creature Fruit with the Atom Brain, but I'm excited to check out the other ones and just indulge in some nice 50s sci-fi goodness. I always love that.
yeah, like I know with you being a fan of Lou Costello, I think I would be really interested to hear what you think of
Yeah, I haven't. I don't think I've really seen him much in that type of movie, so that'll be very interesting to check out. My next title is one that is. I don't think it's a bad movie. I would just say up front that it's not really for me after watching it. So uh, take what I say with a grain of salt. RLJ Films has put out Taurus, starring Colson Baker, aka Machine Gun Kelly. And this kind of plays almost like a fictional version of his life. And I was like, I don't like or dislike Machine Gun Kelly on principle, really. I think he's popped up in some things and been like good in the performances, but uh, there's some stuff with his because he's in a relationship with Megan Fox that there's some things going on there that I'm not. I don't want to cast aspersions, but I've heard some rumors that it's not exactly a great relationship, kind of like we were talking about earlier with certain toxic relationships. That being said, I will put that aside and just say this movie overall, it's fine. It's just kind of a little bit. It's a little bit of a drag. I know that's kind of a lame criticism, but it is. It's just kind of. It's kind of repetitive in its narrative drive. Coulson, he plays a musician, not unlike himself, who is kind of very like he's kind of not in a great place. He's just doing a lot of like drugs. He's kind of like not he doesn't seem super invested in his music either. He's kind of like setting himself up for failure. And one day he kind of like one night he's like partying with this call girl who comes over and like steals his like crystal, which he says like contains like his energy, like his like essence basically. And like it just kind of is more like a mental thing, but just kind of like she takes it and it kind of like he doesn't know where it is. He doesn't realize she's taken it, but he just knows that he's lost it. And it's kind of like his life starts to unravel in various ways of just like he starts like getting into like fights with different people, like his like manager and his assistant, and then he's just spiraling out of control and just it's just like a descent into like uh not madness, but just like descent into just like a really bad place for anybody, but especially like an artist who's like dealing in like heavy drugs. So you're spending this whole movie with him, seeing if he is going to kind of pull out of his tailspin, see if he could possibly get his life on track. He has a young daughter who he's not really close with. He like makes her call him by like his actual name instead of dad. He like has that kind of relationship with her. He has just a very contentious relationship with a lot of people just because he's not really happy with himself, that type of thing. His performance is good, and it's so good it's annoying because this character is kind of loathsome. Uh, the people around him are quite good. Scoot McNairy plays his manager. He kind of has a smaller role, but I really like Scoot McNairy, so it's nice to see him. I mostly watched this because I knew Megan Fox was in this movie, and like my wife is a pretty decent Megan Fox fan. She loves Jennifer's Body. I know you recently talked about Jennifer's Body. Her appearance in this movie is like 4 or 5 minutes long, and she does not utter a single word. She is shown in like a soundproof like recording booth, like arguing with Coulson, and then that's like the end of her art. And I was like, we watched this damn movie for her, and she doesn't even utter a word. This is ridiculous. But that's not to say like my hopes were hinging on that. I was just like that was what my main draw for it. I do really like the actress who plays his assistant. She is very good in this movie, and she kind of like humanizes him and like gives him kind of like an emotional anchor, which I really appreciated. But overall, this is the type of movie that's just like I'm kind of sensitive to. Or my favorite movie are not movies that where there are people that are just kind of self-destructing in front of you. I don't really like drug addiction dramas for that reason as well, just for kind of like personal reasons. But like addiction drama always just kind of frustrate me, and I'm just like, I won't get into it, but it's like that type of thing where it's just like I don't want people to spiral out of control, and it just frustrates me, and that's what mostly this movie is. It's a fine movie. If you're a fan of Machine Gun Kelly, I'm sure you'll really appreciate this. If you're not as sensitive as I am to these type of narratives, you might find something in this as well. It's not the best version of this type of movie, but it's decent. I'm admitting it's not a bad movie. It's just not for me. The release is fine. It has a nice audiovisual presentation. There's no special features, so you're not going to get any extra context or like insights from like where Machine Gun Kelly was coming from with this character or anything. But overall, it's fine, just not for me really. But Taurus, maybe I'll watch it again, probably not, but like it's fine.
That seems like I don't really like Machine Gun Kelly, so I probably would not want to watch it. But
yeah, you're probably good then.
You might be. I mean, people watching, you might be into that, so that's cool.
Yeah.
I think that my next title is something we can all kind of rally around. That is the Rocky set. Like my husband thinks it's so weird that I like these movies, and like he also like thinks it's so mind-blowing that like Sylvester Stallone writes these movies. And I'm like, why?
Jason, why don't you understand?
Right? Haters be hating, but I am really excited. So I'm gonna be reviewing 1 and 2 this week, and then 3 and 4 next week. I want to take my time with 4 because there's 2 different cuts of the movie, and I want to be able to tell y'all what that's like in some detail. So I didn't want to rush that. I'll probably keep Rocky pretty short because that's like a movie everybody's talked about or seen. But I think this is like one of the all-American great 70s movies. It's one of those rare sports movies that I think truly transcends the genre. It's much more of a movie about an underdog story. And I think this is kind of interesting when you put it in the context of when it was made. Which was like maybe 4 years, I think, out after the whole like Nixon Watergate scandal. So I think it's something that the country kind of like really needed at this time. This was a fairly low budget movie. I forget exactly. I think it was like maybe under $1 million, but ended up earning 225 million at the box office, and that doesn't include subsequent home video releases, merchandise, etc. So it's interesting because it's an underdog story, but the movie itself is an underdog story. I mean, it's fascinating because as a student of 70s grindhouse films, this very much feels like it has that grindhouse element, but it has this sort of prestigious polish to it. And that's like really cool when you see like underground, like, or you see like grindhouse staples like Joe Spinell in this, for example. Like that's fucking great. I love that. So the transfer is really nice. I brought up the grindhouse fact because I think in this transfer, this 4K transfer, they really keep that essence of sort of a grimy like grittiness, but in a way that's still elevated and looks like a really nice polished 4K. So it's not like squeaky clean. It still has that vibe that the filmmakers were going for, and I really appreciate that. Now this whole set has some audio issues. And we at the time of this recording, there's no
replacement program.
Yes. It's like my brain's like stopped working for a second there. Yeah, replacement program. So I'll give you a really quick rundown of what the problems are. I got the full information from the digital bits, which I will include my source if you want to check that out yourself. But the original theatrical audio on Rocky is actually a downgraded mix from the 5.1, and it's not in the original mono. Rocky 2 has all the audio tracks at the wrong pitch. 3, I think it just affects all the foreign language audio tracks. They're pitched wrong. And then one shot of the theatrical cut of Rocky 4 apparently is I think this might actually be more of an aspect ratio than audio, but I haven't seen Rocky 4 yet, so I'll talk more in detail when I get that. But that's just an overview. Again, we will keep you updated if there is a replacement program, which I'm sure there is, because like Warner Brothers usually always kind of takes care of their products, especially when they're dealing with something like as prestigious as like the Rocky catalog. So yeah, now the sequel I've never seen. I actually never seen any of these sequels. So this is going to be a fun ride. I have to say the first sequel is maybe like one of the purest sequels, kind of like The Godfather 2. And by that I mean it expands on the first film, yet it builds off of its central characters in a really interesting and compelling way. This time around we see Rocky and Adrian's relationship develop. They get married, they have a baby. It explores like post fame, like Rocky tries to get like commercials and different endorsement deals, and we find out isn't the best reader. So that's something that he kind of struggles with and works with. And again, we see this like hero, like I wouldn't say anti-hero, but like hero that's just such an underdog, and we just want him to like, oh, we're just rooting for him so much. And like, of course he does the rematch with Apollo Creed, which I won't spoil, but it's amazing, it's epic. Rocky 2 conversely also looks really good. Again, I think it is transferred in a way that retains the films. I mean, this is a much higher budget movie, but it still kind of has a little bit of that grit and grime that the first film has. Maybe not as much, but it still kind of retains that sort of grindhousey kind of feel to it. So far, sans the audio issues, great set. I'm really excited to see 3 and 4. I think it's going to be interesting to see both cuts of 4, because I think there's a robot in it that they cut out. That should be interesting. But if you want the robot version, it's got the theatrical, so you're all good.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's a bummer to hear that this set isn't like pristine out of the gate, but I hope that Warner does the right thing and kind of fixes any of the issues that people are finding with this set. But so far sounds like it's still worth a watch. Moving on to my next title. This is from a label which I have to be careful with, because they're always like releasing some extreme stuff that sometimes I'm just like, what did I get myself into? But this one, it's not bad. I really quite enjoy this one. This is from Unearthed Films, Unearthed Classics, and this is The Grand Tour, which is like probably the tamest movie I've seen them release so far, which I'm excited about. I enjoy it. So you got this here. This does have reversible cover art, which I'll show you. Right here. And it's interesting. The Grand Tour is not it is the original title, but it wasn't always the title that this was released as. Let me see if it has the original. Yeah, it was originally called Timescape, but then like the title that they like that's supposed to be under is the Grand Tour. And this is from David Toohey, who I believe, yeah, he did Pitch Black, the Vin Diesel movie, which I reviewed on the site. The Arrow Video 4K was really good. This was a little bit before then. So yeah, this stars Jeff Daniels, and this kind of plays in some. I don't want to like spoil too much, but I kind of have to at least explain a little bit of what is going on. Jeff Daniels, he plays a dad of a young daughter. His wife has passed away, and I hate to say this, but there's an accident at the beginning of this movie that when I first saw it, I kind of laughed at it, which like just because I thought it was so ridiculous. I'll just say it involves an animal, and I was just like, oh, what is going on? And it's just like this animal like caused this death, and I was just like, this is wild. But that aside, my dark humor aside, so this is just a man kind of like mourning the death of his wife. He has this young daughter he's trying to take care of. He's opening up this bed and breakfast that he's like working on, and then like one day a mysterious woman and like a group of people show up, and it's just like, hey, we want to stay here. And he's like, oh, we're still like refurbishing stuff, we're like fixing this up. And she's like, we really want to stay here, I'll pay you like above your rate and stuff. And she like offers a ton of money, and he's like, all right, I guess we're doing this. What you learn, and I will not say the purpose, is like they are not from this time. They are like a group of people who are in like this time period for a specific function, which I will not get into. You'll have to watch the movie. But it goes into some very interesting like aspects of just like time travel and destiny and like redemption. And at the same time, his young daughter's grandfather on his wife's dad is trying to like reclaim custody of his young daughter, because he's like trying to argue that the Jeff Daniels character is not a like capable dad because he's in mourning. It's ridiculous, but it's the type of scenario that's been in a bunch of movies like this. But the way this plays out, I think, is very interesting. It almost I believe this movie that I'm thinking of like actually came out after this, but it kind of reminds me of the movie Frequency with Dennis Quaid and Jim Caviezel, which I quite like and is a favorite of my wife's, which I'm excited to tell her about this movie. Like, oh, this movie's kind of like Frequency. But this has really interesting uses of like time travel and, like I said, like a real nice emotional core. And it just really worked for me. I really quite enjoyed this movie. It's a really, really well-paced, tight sci-fi movie that works really well for me, at least. Jeff Daniels does a really nice job. I think all the supporting characters also delivered good performances. The young girl who plays his daughter is very charming and cute, and like especially the beginning of this kind of reminds me of the Christina Ricci Casper and their dynamic, but goes in a very different way, obviously. But that kind of like stuck out to me. So yeah, Unearthed Classics. I'm glad they brought this out because they did a really nice job with releasing this. This comes from a 4K scan of the original camera negative. It looks really nice. It sounds really good as well. This has I mentioned the alternate title, Timescape. There is a brief like alternate opening credits where you can see that that original title as presented if you want that to see that as a special feature. There's also a 19-minute interview on this, and then like some production stills and trailers and stuff. So not packed to the gills with special features, but like some attempt at giving some good special features. And like I said, the reversible cover art, the 4K scan, which is the audio and video is always like my top priority. So if those are good, I'm good. So this has a really nice audio and visual. So Unearthed Classics, they did not scar me with this one like they have with some of their releases. I'm really glad I checked this one out, especially if you're a sci-fi fan, a Jeff Daniels fan. Check it out. It's a fun one. So yeah, the Grand Tour.
It looks very interesting, and I like that cast. So it seems like a definite win. So I'm going to be finishing my Truffaut set with the last two films. And it's really interesting because I think the first two films on this disc, well, if you hadn't seen our show last week, I'll share this off again. There's two films per disc. But yeah, I think I liked the first two films better than I liked the other two films. I think they're all good in their own way, but I think the first two are a little bit more accessible. So The Man Who Loved Women starts off in a really interesting, almost like darkly funny way, which is it's a funeral for the titular man who loved women, and it's just a procession of his former female lovers coming to mourn. One lady has her face covered in bandages, which will come back into play in the movie. But what we get is basically a series of flashbacks to this gentleman and his just being a man whore. Sorry, I don't know how else to say it. It's just yeah. So this movie is cheeky and but it is poetic at times. And again, I think this is a good stance to take when you have a protagonist that is very unapologetically into just conquest after conquest. I will say that the movie starts off like this guy's kind of a creep. He, like, for example, very early in the film, there's this woman that he sees, and he he tries to get her number, and he goes so far as to commit insurance fraud to get her contact information. It's really convoluted and weird, but it somehow works. And I'm glad that they don't go as hard for the rest of the film. Like, there are moments when I'm like, yeah, he's being a little bit weird or extra, but I think Truffaut does a nice job of softening his image to make him less of a creep. And I think the latter half of the movie was easier for me to get on board with. I will say that this movie's 2 hours long, and it does not need to be 2 hours long. The pacing is a bit of a chore. And I know some people that really love this film, so maybe I'm just seeing something that other people, I mean, maybe I'm not seeing what other people are seeing, but yeah, it's fine. I think one of my least favorite movies is on this disc, and that is another one that seems to get a lot of praise, but it was a little bit hard for me to really get into, and that's The Green Room, which, again, I think, in my opinion, is the most inaccessible movie in this particular collection. I do appreciate that it's a deep meditation on grief, and I don't think Truffaut ever did a horror movie in the traditional sense, but I will say that this is very much like being haunted, but not in a literal sense, but of course a metaphorical one. And then, I think this kind of reflects in the film's photography, which is very moody, especially in the beginning half of the movie. Yeah, I mean, again, there's not really anything to complain about. This movie is well acted, directed. There's a lot of interesting thematic underpinnings. I just found it a bit dry and a little aloof at times, and I think that's a little bit par for the course with a Truffaut film. But, like, I don't know. I mean, Small Change I think is a fantastic movie, and I mean, yeah, I think a movie like that is also not greatly paced, but I found it more intriguing, more endearing. But I don't know. Both films look really nice. The transfers are great. They're not pristine. They do have a little bit of, like, issues with, like, maybe some minor artifacts and like a little bit of, like, scratches and stuff, but nothing that was distracting at all. Again, these are visually compelling films, so I'm glad that they got a new Blu-ray. These have no features. They have theatrical trailers, which I don't really consider to be a special feature, but it would have been nice to get like some like a historical commentary trailer would be perfect. Somebody that was like a scholar of his work to kind of help me put some of this stuff into context. But yeah, it's a really nice set. I think I don't know if it would be a very good beginner set for this filmmaker, but if you're looking to fill in your collection from like his more famous stuff, this is certainly a good set to have.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to. I've been talking about a lot of Truffaut films over the last couple months, and especially when you were talking about the ones last week, it really piqued my interest. So I'm gonna delve into that set as soon as I can, just to see how this kind of compares to the other individual titles I've been able to talk about recently. So glad you were able to talk about that. Heading into my final stretch of titles, I have three. My last three titles are going to be collaboration between Ronin Flix and Scorpion Releasing. And my first one of these is the Nick Nolte movie, Who'll Stop the Rain, which, yes, the Creedence Clearwater Revival song is used in this several times. There's a lot of CCR in this movie. This has a really great soundtrack, and the movie overall, I think it's pretty decent. It's about Nick Nolte plays a Vietnam vet who he comes back from the war and does a favor for one of his buddies by, I think he's smuggling in cocaine or heroin, some kind of drugs, into the country, and like he's supposed to be delivering it to his friend's wife. And whenever he goes to deliver it to his wife, his friend's wife, he kind of gets mixed up in this larger kind of criminal thing where like there's some like drug dealers and like corrupt police officers that kind of like send this whole this whole plan into a tailspin. There's also some light potential romance between Nick Nolte and his friend's wife, like along their journey, because they have to go on the run from these people. So it's kind of like a on the run type movie where there's some potential bubbling romance, but it's like forbidden because it's his best friend's wife and all that type of stuff. And she also has her own issues and with like drugs and everything. So it's a decent movie. It didn't like blow me away, but I thought it was fairly entertaining, mostly for the performances. Nick Nolte especially does a really good job. This has a pretty entertaining finale. There's like kind of a standoff type situation, which is kind of drawn out, but like it builds very nicely, and I thought this was pretty entertaining. Overall, perfectly fine movie. If you watch it, you probably won't dwell on it for too long afterwards, but it's like just one of those movies that's like solid and then just floats out of your mind. So this movie, the transfer, it comes from a 2K master from the Interpositive. There's still some like minor deficiencies with this, like a little bit of density fluctuation, some nicks and scratches here and there, but you can definitely tell that this is from a new master. It's been cleaned up really nicely. It has like a really natural, nice picture that looks as good as probably it's going to look. The sound is of nice quality. There is a commentary track from film historians Daniel Kramer and Scout Tafoya. And then there's also some interviews with one of the actors, an associate producer, and the screenwriter. So there are a fair number of special features here that kind of give a little bit extra content or context to the movie. And so it looks pretty solid, sounds good, has a pretty decent number of special features. If you're a Nick Nolte fan, he's really good in this. It's worth a watch. Maybe if you can find it somewhere to sample it first, maybe see if it's up your alley or not. But overall, I recommend it. I think it's a pretty good drama. This is from the 70s, and it's just kind of a solidly made drama. So yeah, 78 it says. So yeah.
So who did Stop the Rain?
I can't tell you. That'd be a spoiler.
Okay. Fair enough. No, that does sound good. I think Nick Nolte's a pretty underrated actor. I loved him in Poker Face, the recent episode with him, and it was great. I'm gonna bring this that we've been talking about some really classy, beautiful movies. So I want to bring it down a little bit and talk about Birdemic. So
All right.
this comes from Severin and Intervision. This is the Birdemic trilogy. I want to. This lenticular cover is, mwah. And
Nice.
so I was doing a little research, and I believe part three will be getting an individual release, but I think part two is only available in this box set. Um, so, and then I think Birdemic, this version of Birdemic with the extras, I believe, are maybe ported over from the previous Blu-ray. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I know in part two there's a lot of like exclusive features just to that release. So that's exciting for Birdemic fans. I'm sure there's some out there. But so I've never seen this film. Okay, I certainly heard of it. It came out around the same time as The Room, and I'm a really big fan of that movie. So yeah, this was quite the journey. So the movie starts off with this really bad score that plays on an almost endless loop during the opening credits. And I mention this because I feel like that's a real it's a taste of what's to come. So yeah, this is a really bad movie. Bad dialogue, bad acting, bad editing, amazingly bad green screen effects. Of course, this movie's pretty famous for having the birds that are just like clip art,
Nice.
that move really statically. They'll dive bomb and explode, for reasons.
Yeah.
Like they very much want this to be the birds, so they take a lot of cues from that. But yeah, so I will say that kind of like The Room, there's something so pure and endearing and fun about this movie, and that's why I believe it's so beloved. The first movie acts the first movie's act is slow, and it's like it plays off like a painfully awkward rom-com, and then it kind of suddenly veers into this like bird attack. And what's interesting is it's a very not subtle message about global warming. It gets very preachy. The second one's even worse, I think, and that's probably like my biggest complaint is nobody wants to watch a movie that feels like they're being kind of preached to, even though I do think that the message is vital. Nobody likes a lecture where people are wagging their fingers at you. So that's the one thing that I think kind of sucks about this movie, but there is a wealth of features on this. It's really nice. And it's a really good start to the disc. This is just no interior artwork. And then I will be also talking about the sequel a little bit like later on.
Nice. Yeah, that I've never seen any of those films. I saw that you got that in, and like I just chose not to like involve myself with this box set because I was just like, I know myself, and I just know that I would not get like the so bad it's good effect from this. So I was just like, I can't do this. So more power to you. I'm glad you decided to take this one on. So I look forward to hearing about the second one here in a little bit. But before we hear about that, I have another one from Ronin Flicks and Scorpion Releasing, and that is Body and Soul, which a little bit while ago you had a film noir set that was very boxing heavy, and this kind of goes along with that. It's a boxing movie, and I feel if this would have been made like a couple decades earlier, it could have fit right in there. So this stars Leon Isaac Kennedy, and also Jane Kennedy, and with a guest appearance from Muhammad Ali, which didn't you recently have a movie where he like in that Milk movie? Yeah, yeah. So he's just
Um,
popping up in all these boxing movies. So that
yeah,
was fun.
yeah, I'm trying. Sorry, I'm trying to think what that was. Requiem from a Heavyweight. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what it
yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so he showed up in this one too. There's also Peter Lawford. There's a lot of good people in this. So you can even see Muhammad Ali back here on the
Hmm.
back cover art. So they feature him prominently, even though he's probably in the movie like 12 minutes maybe. Which I mean, it's not bad, but like he's not the star by any means.
Yeah.
So this one is also fine. It's pretty good. The what kind of holds me back on this one? This is a tale of like a kind of like a young hotshot boxer who kind of like is kind of like fast talking, very kind of like hyping himself up, creating his own legacy type of situation. And he actually kind of delivers on that promise and starts to like win fights and build himself a name very quickly. And he goes by like Leon the Lover. He kind of has like a persona of just like kind of being a ladies' man. He falls in love with this reporter who comes to cover like his fight and kind of like ropes her into a romantic relationship after like just like a minor bit of just like I'm not interested, and then she ends up being interested. Of course, that old trope. But of course, can he stay faithful? No, he's a famous boxer. What are you gonna do? But this is just kind of like your standard, just uh, a little bit like buying into your own grandeur, getting caught up in this lifestyle, being humbled, and then kind of like trying to work your way back to being like a respected fighter, learning like going back to the basics, remembering why you started boxing in the first place, getting like your relationship and like your lives in order, just like making sure like becoming a better person like after being like a total shit for like the first half of the movie basically. And I it mostly works for me. I kind of get a little bit irritated because I get so irritated with him at the beginning of the movie that I'm just like, I don't really care that much about your redemption, but like it's fine. It works. It's not like completely unbelievable. And like the fight that like it culminates with a fight in which like he's fighting like this madman who basically like just wants to just kill whoever he's in the ring with. So he'll like fight dirty if necessary. He's just like he pushes the boundaries. So it's kind of like a very violent fight at the end, which is it's a really solid fight. So this doesn't reinvent the boxing genre. It just kind of has that kind of redemption arc that if it's not this particular sport, you've seen it in other sports movies. But overall, it's pretty solid made. Leon Isaac Kennedy does a pretty good job in like the lead role. And like as a Blu-ray release, this is it's pretty solid. This is it's not noted as being from a new scan, so it is kind of a little bit rougher. There's a little bit more prevalent like nicks and scratches than the previous title I was talking about. The grain can get a little bit clumpy at times, but overall it's a solid enough video. Just it could probably have used a new master to clean it up, but it still looks fine. This does have an interview with Leon Isaac Kennedy, the star, and then some trailers. So if you're a fan of boxing movies or the actor, like, or if you just want to see Muhammad Ali in a small role, it's a fine movie. It's not the best boxing movie. It's a little bit frustrating, but it's okay. So another tepid recommendation. I'm like, if you want to seek it out, test it out. If
Yeah.
not, you're not missing anything.
Yeah, I do find like it is funny because like I just recently started to really appreciate like boxing movies, and I guess this is like culminating in checking out all the Rocky movies, and I eventually want to see all the Creed movies now. But
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds interesting. So my final title is Birdemic 2, The Resurrection.
Okay.
And again, I believe that this is exclusive to the Trilogy box set. And we do have a ton of new features. That's fantastic. Severin always really comes to play with their releases. So, um, so this takes place in Hollywood, and this is about an indie filmmaker. This folds in the two, no, I guess like a lot of the original cast like shows up and is in this film. So this movie definitely has the same problems as the first one: bad acting, awful production design, the green screen's really bad. I, however, I think this film was actually technically a little bit better than the first film. The narrative does seem a little bit more focused, a little bit more. It does go completely off the rails, which I'll get into. They introduce this idea of prehistorical birds, which it's sort of half baked into this idea of like why this is happening, and of course a big spiel about global warming. We get a lot of meta jokes, a lot of references to the birds, which there was some sprinkled throughout the first film, but they kind of hit that harder this time. This movie also amps up the sex and nudity. Actually, I feel like the first one didn't have any nudity, but this one definitely does. Oh, and we get zombies and cave people. Why?
What?
I don't know why. Just because. Here's the thing though, there's something so special about the first film, because, and I know that sounds dumb, but there really is something kind of magical about the first film because it was made in a vacuum. This director thought he was making a really serious, fun, thoughtful movie. And, kind of like The Room, it became sort of like this so bad it's good cult classic. The problem with sequels and stuff to that is when you put the thumb on the scale like that, it's like it's going to be self-referential. It's not going to have that kind of earnest sort of I don't know, endearing quality. And like, again, there's like, why are there zombies? Why are there cave people? Why is most of this happening? It's just because it just feels like they're just trying to be like, all right, this is a sequel, this is a cult classic, we gotta like really spice things up and throw in some weird stuff, put in some nudity. Like, I don't know, I don't get it. I was never bored with this movie though. I will say it was entertaining. um like I said, if you want to get technical, I do think that it tries to have a more maybe streamlined or focused narrative, even though again that's not completely true because we have whole subgenres thrown in there for reasons that are never fully realized. But again, you're watching this because of its silliness, but I just think that it's a little bit more intentional this time. But that being said, it was fun enough. Next week, I will be talking about Birdemic 3 Sea Eagle, which is really interesting because this just came out last year. And again, I believe that they will have a individual release of the new one. But and I mean, of course, I'm gonna focus on this next week. But if you want to just see what the features are for that, so yeah. Um, I haven't seen the third one. I hear that's the worst of these, so that should be interesting. This
Yeah.
movie never wears out its welcome though, because it is only 74 minutes long, not including the credits. So that's what I'm ending on. The Birdemic movies are fascinating, but by far, I could definitely see rewatching the first one.
Nice. Like I said earlier, more power to you. Glad you're having fun. My final title kind of brings together elements of different things we were talking about earlier. We were talking about priests who were like on the verge of different like of Breaking Bad. We were talking about erotic thrillers. Let's combine them. Let's go for my final title, and that is Last Rites.
Wow.
Ooh, like that steamy cover art. So you have this stars Tom Berenger and Daphne Zuniga. I'm sorry, I'm butchering her name, but yeah. So this one is it's something. So Tom Berenger, he plays a priest, but he's kind of has like a kind of a rough background. He's kind of like he's like has ties to different like mob people, and like he's like a priest, but he's kind of like a dark priest. And then at the beginning of this film, Daphne's character, she is like having an affair with this guy who is connected to the mob, and his wife comes to like the hotel room they're staying at. His wife kills her husband and like leaves, ends up leaving Daphne alive. And then Daphne ends up going to the church to kind of confess confess what has happened and everything, and kind of gets involved. Like it kind of becomes like a forbidden, like it evolves eventually into kind of like him helping her, but then also becoming like a forbidden romance. But like, will this priest break his vows like servitude to God to be with this beautiful woman who is like just like she's right there, and she's like a goddess and stuff. Will he do it? Yeah, of course he does. Yes. This is a like a steamy erotic thriller. Of course he's gonna break his vows. And it's just kind of like she's in danger. They're kind of like he's trying to keep her alive while like this dude's wife is still out there. He also has a history with the guy's wife. So there's kind of like this like complex like intermingling of people, and who wants who dead and for what reasons, and who's gonna go to hell for breaking their vows, all that type of stuff. This movie, it's okay. What really bothers me is like this ends up, and this is a problem with a lot of like especially 80s erotic thrillers, but just like the genre at large, it boils down the woman to basically an agent of chaos, where like if you get involved with like all the problems are basically the fault of the woman's, and she is kind of like a puppet master to like basically bring everyone down. Which I hate that messaging of just like if you just wouldn't fall for this tricky lady, like you'd be fine. Like it's all like got to stay away from these ladies, they're tricky. I don't know, that's just kind of icky messaging for me. That being said, like it's an entertaining enough movie. It's just that messaging just really like it was like, yes, a priest deciding that he wants to fuck, sure, go for it. Like that's fine. But just like the ending, just kind of like as we get towards the ending and like you're starting to like all these people are coming together and you're kind of starting to like learn different secrets and everything, it just kind of like ruined it a little bit for me. It didn't completely ruin it, but just like I was like on like a pretty decent like this is good, and I was kind of like, oh, that's disappointing. So it kind of fumbled the end, but like I can see why people would have thought this was impactful in the 80s. I would have been like, yeah, that's edgy, that's good. But like modern times, I wasn't caring for it. But this Blu-ray, it's a pretty solid Blu-ray. It is not noted as being from a new master, but I would say it holds up better than Body and Soul. There is still like some like nicks and scratches and a little like some compression artifacts, but nothing too egregious. It sounds pretty solid. So overall, a solid Blu-ray. This has an interview with director Donald Belisario, and the theatrical trailer. So you do have a commentary track, which does like elevate it a little bit in my book. I love a good commentary track. So if you're an erotic thriller fan, if you like the idea of a priest just giving in to temptation, Last Rites, yeah, I got it for you. But just know that it has like its mind stuck in the past and it's not very evolved, but that's the nature of the genre much of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like when you were describing it, it definitely sounded like maybe a pretty typical neo-noir, which, like as much as I love noirs, there's always this sort of tussle with the femme fatale and how that is sometimes seen as progressive and at the same time regressive. So it's a weird,
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely see what you mean though. Like, but yeah, I gotta say, we always talk about a wide variety of stuff, but I feel like this episode in particular was a wild journey. Through
Can I just mention one thing about this movie? I forgot. It just popped into my head, about Last Rites. There is, and like, okay, it's not like a very exploitative movie or anything, but whenever these two are making out, it is the most tongue-heavy makeouts that I have seen in a movie in a long time. It is very tongue-forward. It was wild. I was like, Tom, why are you using so much tongue? Like, it was just like he would just like lean with it, and I was just like, this love scene is wild. I'm sorry, I just had to let the people know.
No, I love that.
If that interests you, I felt it was worth pointing out.
Yeah, I mean, listen, tongue enthusiast, if you're watching this, I mean, that might be a selling point. Like,
yeah, look it up.
Yeah. Hey, no kink shame, you do you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's all we have. Like I said, we covered a very wide spectrum. Oh yeah.
Yeah. We have the giveaway. Let us know what we talked about that interested you, and you could be one of the 5 people who wins Glorious, this crazy glory hole psychedelic horror movie with J.K. Simmons and Ryan Quanten. Like, you're gonna want to check it out. So if you want to be one of 5 people, just drop a comment. But also make sure you subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. I know you're about to talk about all that, but just you could win this fun movie.
Yeah, and like I said, absolutely love this movie. Definitely comment and you'll be entered to win 5 copies. That's awesome. So you have a pretty good chance. And yeah, the movie is a lot of fun. And do check out my interview with Rebecca, the director. She's amazing. She is I'll also link to her podcast. Her podcast is really great, very high profile horror podcast that she hosts, which is amazing. Very knowledgeable, very awesome. The story she has about J.K. Simmons in the interview is mwah, so you want to check that out. But yeah, like you said, we're always doing stuff like this, and we have these videos weekly. So be sure to subscribe. Again, liking, commenting. While commenting this time will also enter you to win if you're in the US. So yeah, and as always, thanks for hanging out with us.